90,499 cases with 13,782 deaths. Orange County specifically has 39,412 cases with 438 deaths. Seminole County has 8,911 cases with 207 deaths. And then we usually compare it to the Rebecca Jones dashboard. And I'm looking to see how significant that is. There's about 52,000 more cases. Does that look right? Am I looking at this right, Haley? Comparing the two, it looks like about 2,000 more cases in Orange County and about 1,000 more in Seminole County. The deaths are about the same. In addition, Rebecca Jones reports the prison counts, and in Florida prisons, there's 22,325 cases with 123 deaths. Since we have our guests with us, I want to get right into that. We have former Representative Sean Shaw here to talk about Amendment 3. A couple weeks ago, we had the opposing side, and say that the for side. Now we're going to have the opposing side. And thank you so much for being with us.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Would you give us a little introduction of your background and how you started getting involved in this issue?
Sure. I'm here in Tampa, and I was born in Jacksonville and raised in Tallahassee, and then I moved to Tampa. I worked on Alex Sink's governor's race. That's what got me to Tampa. And so I ran for the House in Tampa, and I was elected in 2016. And then I ran for Attorney General in 2018, and I was the Democratic nominee. So I was honored to be that. And, after my Attorney General race, I knew I wanted to get involved in the presidential. So I did some of that. And then this Amendment 3 issue, I became aware of it, and we did a little bit more research, and I became alarmed at what I thought some of the consequences would be. And so this is one of the things that I spend a lot of my time doing. But now I don't know if I'm more mad about Amendment 3 or if I'm more mad about the law that DeSantis is proposing to criminalize protest and to protect police officers doing anything they want to do ever against protesters. So I don't know what I'm more mad about, but I'm here to talk about Amendment 3.
Yes, it's hard. Yeah, if we have time, I would like to jump into that issue because I was going to give an update about that. I would love to discuss that with you as well. So right now, I guess the big argument for the amendment is that 3.8 million voters in Florida can't participate in partisan primaries, and because they're not registered Democrats or Republican. So what would you say to those voters about this amendment?
I would say that's a good argument. They should be able to vote in primaries in some fashion. The problem is Amendment 3 goes a huge step further, and it will allow Democrats to vote in Republican primaries and Republicans to vote in Democratic primaries. That's the problem. If this were just an amendment that opened up and allowed non-party affiliated voters to vote in whatever primary they chose, I wouldn't be flying off the walls about it. The problem is that you do away with partisan primaries completely, and there's no such thing as a Democratic primary or Republican primary anymore. There's just a giant primary where everybody votes and the top two candidates advance to a general. That's a problem. That changes the type of candidate that's elected. It changes, I'm going to argue, it changes the color of a lot of these seats and who gets elected, and it's a problem. It's a step further than open primaries. Open primaries, that's one thing. This is different. This is something that only California, Louisiana do, and I think it's a step too far.
Okay, and can you give us an example? Actually, there was the example of the DeSantis, Adam Putman race. They're saying that those would have been our choices if this had been the way we do things. But the people, proponents of this amendment, are saying that that's simply not true, that it wouldn't have come out that way. So how did they do that to where they came out with that.
One of us is not being honest and one of us is, I guess. I'm going to tell you, I've seen the numbers, and it is very likely. And I mean, I have the report and we have the numbers. It's very likely that if this were the law, you would have had to deal with DeSantis and Putnam for the governor's race. Now, what they are saying is I'm not accounting for the non-party voters and how they vote. I am accounting for that. That is a disclaimer that I'm still giving. Even taking into account how non-party affiliated voters may vote, it is very, very likely that Putnam and DeSantis would have been their nominees for governor. And that's just a fact. I mean, we've done the reports. That's one example. Another example, when we talk about the racial implications, the example I use is Senator Audrey Gibson's seat in Jacksonville. The Black voting share in the Democratic primary is around 70%. If this Amendment 3 were to pass under an all voters vote primary, that would drop to 43%. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that makes it much harder for a Black person to win. Maybe a Black person can win a seat that's not majority Black. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But it's damn sure going to make it harder for Perry Thurston, for Audrey Gibson, for Oscar Braden, for these minority, Bracey, particularly the African-American state Senate seats. That Black voter number goes down dramatically, and it changes the type of candidate that comes out of those seats. That's the problem. Not only does it change that voter Black voting share number, you can imagine for the same reason, progressive candidates are going to have a hard time for the same reason. If now, instead of running in a Democratic primary, they're now trying to convince not only non-party affiliated voters, but now Republicans. So the type of candidate that appeals to Republicans and NPAs is a much less progressive candidate. And that's just a fact. And so one of the reasons that are behind this, one of the reasons that this amendment was put on the ballot was to moderate who's in office. They believe that that is one of the good things about this. I do not. Voters get to choose, just like I want a progressive person to win. Republicans are entitled to choose their Tea Party crazy people. They get to do that. So I don't think moderating anything is a good argument. But the main reason that I got very upset about this was the loss of the Black voting share and Hispanic voting share and what it will do to the Black caucus.
And I know the League of Women Voters were at first for the amendment, and now they've withdrawn that and they're opposed to the amendment. Do you know if that was the reasoning behind I think they're for opening up the primary, right. but is it just this?
It's the racial component was a big part of it. I mean, a lot of us are for opening up and allowing non-party affiliated voters to vote in a primary. That's not what this amendment does. It does the step further, which allows Republicans, as I said, to vote in Democratic primaries and Democrats to vote in theirs. And, it's the NAACP, it's the ACLU, it's the unions, it's the Florida Conservation Voters, it's the League of Women Voters, it's the Black Caucus. It is every group that I'm aware of is against this, and a lot of for the same reason, that this is going to have an effect on minority representation at a time where we can least afford to have an effect on minority representation. And look, I told a reporter this. I'm not saying a Black person can't win a seat that's not majority African American, but I'm not aware of any state senator that's African American that represents a seat that's not majority African American. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it doesn't exist right now. There may be 2 or 3 candidates in the House, Representative Driscoll. I'm trying to think of the other one. I know there's at least 2 or 3 that represent non-majority seats. It's ultimately going to be more difficult for a person of color to succeed Audrey Gibson when the Black voting share goes from 70% to 43%. It just ultimately will. And so I'm not going to support an amendment that does that.
So can you give us an idea, because we briefly discussed some of the ways the other states were doing it. Can you tell me what in your mind would be the ideal way of doing this?
Well, I think you would allow non-party affiliated voters to choose in a particular primary which party primary they want to participate in, and then allow them to do that. I think that's a perfectly and maybe they've got to decide every cycle which one they want to do. I would be fine with something like that. And a lot of states do some version of that, but only 2 states, California and Louisiana, do it how Amendment 3 is proposing to do it, where they abolish partisan primaries completely. That's the step too far that diminishes, in a lot of ways, the minority voting power. But I would be open to having someone declare as an NPA voter which party they want to participate in and let them do that for that cycle. And then the next time they have to declare again, I would be fine with something like that.
And do you know some states that do it that way? Because you said everything but California, and then
I don't know which other states have the open primary system like that off the top of my head. No, but there are several. More, I know more than I think around 10 to 12 do it that way.
That's very interesting. So the way it would work then, you would, when you register to vote, you would say you're independent, and then you would have to check Republican, Democrat, which is that how?
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there how the legislature could do it if they wanted to. You could have someone declare at the time of maybe at the time that they register, and then every cycle they would have to choose which party. I don't know how they would choose. Maybe when they got their mail-in ballot. I don't know how and when the mechanics would work. We'd have to look at the other states for that. But a system where we have open primaries for non-party affiliated voters, I would support. I don't support Amendment 3 because those are 2 different things. I
got it. So do you know if the Democratic Party or the Republican Party would be supportive of a different kind of open primary? Is it just...
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I've traveled around and talked about this amendment, and I get the sense that a lot of people are in support of opening up the primary system because of the 3.8 million voters you're talking about. So I think there is support for that. I've just been telling people that that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a step further than that. But I know that I would support opening up the primaries in that way.
Okay, that makes sense. Haley, do we have any questions in the chat for Rep Shaw?
Yes. So one lists a specific example in Miami-Dade and then in Hillsborough as well, saying that in Miami-Dade, NPAs almost equal the number of Republicans and 72% are Black or Hispanic. In Hillsborough County, a similar situation exists and people of color are 35% of NPAs. Why do you feel that the 1.4 million, those 1.4 million people of color statewide who are registered NPA, like why should they not vote in the primary elections, I think is the question. And then follow-up is that is Rep Shaw aware that minority representation is currently more reflective of the population? Black folks are 6% of the population and Hispanic folks are 37%. Prior to the top 2, minority representation was 35% and it's now 43%. In California, I believe is what they're referencing.
One, Rep Shaw's been Black all his life, so I'm well aware of Black issues. Thank you for that, questioner. Number 2, Rep Shaw did not say that I was not in favor of that. In fact, I made it pretty clear I'm in favor of non-party affiliated voters participating in primaries. I'm not in favor of Republicans participating in my primary. That's what I'm not in favor of, and that's the problem. If you had limited this amendment to just allowing NPA voters to participate, I wouldn't be going nuts like this. And 2, I've said this before, California is not Florida. If I had been the Attorney General nominee in California as a Democrat, guess what I would be? The Attorney General of the state of California. Florida is a partisan, almost even registration state. We are going to have vastly different results than California. And it's my understanding California has about 6 or 7 members of the Black Caucus that are elected statewide. California is not Florida, a state that may be a little bit closer to Florida is Louisiana, who has this type of system. And guess what happened? They lost members of the Black Caucus. And if you know anything about Louisiana Republicans, they are not moderate. So the disagreement the proponents of this and I have is not that I don't think NPAs ought to be able to vote. That's what I'm trying to make clear. It's that next step further, the total dissolution of partisan primaries, that I don't support. And that when you start allowing Republicans to cross over, that's what changes. It's not the NPA makeup. If NPAs vote, your stats about who comprises NPAs and the diversity thereof, that's probably doesn't change. And you're probably right. When you start letting Republicans participate in Democratic seats, that starts skewing who gets elected and what type of person gets elected in a way that I'm not in favor of.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there any other questions in the chat?
Not right. Oh, hang on, one just popped up. So they're referencing that a report that was done kind of, I think, outlining the concern that districts currently represented with Black representatives, that would make it more difficult for like representatives of color to be elected in minority majority districts, was issued by a freelance consultant named Matthew Isbell.
Mm-hmm.
And that he received a donation from the Florida Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. Do you know of any connection between Mr. Isbell, the Democratic Party, and the issuance of this report?
No. Look, man, I know everything is not a conspiracy. There's not a monster behind every curtain. The numbers are what they are. And I'm not gonna get into this, but I'm not aware of that, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so I guess what has come out of this is that you are for open primaries. You're just not for this. And isn't this called the jungle primary? Is that what?
This is called all voters vote, and it implies that it is open primaries. That's kind of what's a little strange about the language, and you have to kind of talk to people and let them know, like, this is not just NPAs coming in. This is NPAs and Republicans coming in. And I mean, you ran for election. Imagine the type of campaign you've got to run if not only do you have to appeal to the Democratic primary and then the general. Imagine now you've got. Let me give another example about the top two result. So if you win 80 to 9 to 5. It's not over. You have the top two vote getters regardless of party advance. There's no runoff. That means you are going to have to run again against that person that got 9%. For example, some of your colleagues that were incumbents lost in their primaries. Under all voters vote, they would not have lost. The top two vote getters advanced to the general. So there would be a round two of what just occurred in the primary before in a lot of these instances. And you know what that means. That is another round of fundraising, another round of calling up to Tallahassee, another round of special interests getting involved. That is very scary. When I was a member of District 61, I didn't even have a Republican opponent at all in my seat. But if I beat someone, by 10 percentage points, guess what? I got to do it again. Because now it's the top two vote getters, nothing's over. So there is no primary and you're done. And so that's another reason that this, the influence, the special interest influence, I don't think the proponents understand. This is going to make it a little worse because of the two rounds of what's going to happen. I mean, I've run before and I know what this means. This means I've got to do it twice.
Wow. When were you in the legislature?
16 to 18.
Okay, so that wasn't that long ago. And what was the big issues that were being tried to get through?
I mean, the biggest one was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened while I was in the legislature, and that was the most emotional kind of political experience I've ever had. They weren't just kids; they were actual victims. Came up to the legislature and they told us they wanted us to ban assault rifles and don't arm teachers. And guess what we did? We did not ban assault rifles, and we armed teachers. Like, the legislature is, you know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's an extremely frustrating place to be as a Democrat sometimes. And but that was the major issue we dealt with. Of course, the budget is always serious in public education and the funding thereof. But this Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and the rallies that went on at the Capitol and the kids walking around, and it was very moving when those victims would come into your office. And if you weren't in tears after they left, then I don't know what kind of person you were, because it was very moving, and it was the most emotional experience I've ever had in elected office.
Yeah, they came up to Tallahassee and they stood in a line in our way and onto the floor with their pictures of their friends that they lost. And that was when we were voting on arming the guardianship program and arming those teachers. And that was extremely, and then what they ended up doing is they canceled that vote for the day and waited until they were in exams so they couldn't come up again. Because
that's such cowardice. And we had Republicans taking the back way to get to the floor because they didn't want to walk through that line of students. They did the same thing. And it was very frustrating. It's one of the, there's a lot of reasons I decided to run for Attorney General, but that experience was very frustrating to me. And I mean, we had one member say, "Why are we listening to kids? We're the adults in the room. We're the ones making the laws." And there was a lot of lack of empathy going on. And then there's a lot of political gamesmanship, a lot of people that professed what a terrible tragedy this was and blah, blah, blah. But we all knew how the vote was going to come down. I could have told you the exact number, and that's exactly what it was. And we had 30, 40 amendments, and all of them, same vote count. Tallahassee can be frustrating sometimes. It can be very rewarding too. You get to do a lot of good stuff, but sometimes it is very frustrating.
Yes, and so what I'd like to do now is if we have any questions in the chat, Haley, let me know, because we are talking about Amendment 3. But I do want to talk about the other big issue that came up just 2 days ago that's frustrating us all right now. This proposed legislation. Do you want to vent out some of your frustration?
It is, it criminalizes, so the governor came out with a list of policy proposals that he's going to ask the legislature to pass in the next session. And it essentially criminalizes protests in a lot of ways. And so it further protects police. It purports to protect police against violence. The irony of this is that the protesters are out here protesting police brutality. And the governor's response to that is a list of policy proposals that protects police and criminalizes the protesters. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't criminalize, but it punishes any locality that wants to, quote, defund the police, unquote. So it doesn't allow local districts to make their own budgetary decisions. Now, I thought that Republicans were the party of small government and local control. Maybe I got that wrong. But to criminalize protests, to suggest that you'll be a felon if you're at a protest where an officer gets injured, there are wildly unconstitutional parts of this, and he knows it. But the point is, this is a signal to his voters, I guess. But any lawyer that's been a lawyer that's gone to law school, period, you don't have to have practiced law. If you've been to law school, you understand that there's huge components of that are unconstitutional. You are allowed, you have the constitutional right to protest, you have free speech, you have a whole lot of things, and there's no compelling state interest for him to be able to go around that. But the fact that the governor of this state can put forth some proposals like that in response to the protests about police brutality says a lot about where we are, not only as a state, but as a country. And so we've got a lot of work to do. I was telling someone, we got a lot of work to do in 2020, and I don't want to talk about anything having to do with 2022 until after 2020. But other than Trump, that is the thing that I've been the most upset about as a policy proposal, what the governor just released the other day. It was that troubling. It was that authoritarian. It was that unconstitutional. And it was just a slap in the face to protesters in the streets protesting that Black Lives Matter and protesting that you shouldn't kill unarmed Black people in police custody. And we're only protesting against abuses. Nobody is protesting the police. We're protesting the overreach. And for the governor to say, well, I'm going to make sure that we're going to try to have a chilling effect on all. It was very disheartening. This feels like the 1960s. This feels like things that went on a long, long time ago. And it is very disheartening. And we'll see how the legislature treats it. I get the sense that it's probably even a little much for the legislature to do, and that's saying a lot. But I imagine there will be certain components that will pass. But I just, it's a shame that protesting police overreach in certain cases has turned into such a volatile issue. But it's kind of where we are, and let's see. We got November 3rd coming up, but I tell you what, the minute that's over, let's talk again. How about that?
Yeah, definitely. That proposed legislation. I had an interview with the Orlando Sentinel with my opponent yesterday, and that came up because they said they were going to ask all the candidates that question, but right. They just asked us because we were the first ones to be on since that legislation came up. And my opponent very much watered it down, saying that, it's just it's not unconstitutional. We're just trying to keep the law. And he really said something like, you can't make comments about it until you've actually read the bill. And
what bill?
Well, the proposed legislation. Right. Yeah. But it doesn't, he completely missed the point, because the way I see this, it can be interpreted so broadly, and there could be a completely peaceful protest and one person falls out of line, and it could be someone not even related to the protest. And then the officers using that as an excuse to round up all those peaceful protests.
I mean, the point is, if you're at a Black Lives Matter protest and an officer gets hurt, Black Lives Matter could be charged in a RICO action, a conspiracy. Everyone at that could be charged as a conspirator under this proposed legislation.
Yeah, and it even said that people would lose their jobs, like if they were. That's
another thing. Like if you work for the state or a municipality, you're going to lose.
It is just when I think that, because some of the stuff that I had to deal with this past session and the session before blew my mind, that they were focusing on this kind of ridiculousness when we have all these other real problems that we should be tackling. And just when I think it can't get more crazy than this happens.
It is.
It's hard to come up with the words.
It's hard to come up with words because I'm like you. I mean, I'm pretty cynical, but when I saw this, I was even surprised. And I have not seen one piece of legislation from the governor that seeks to protect victims of police brutality. I have not seen one policy proposal from the governor even acknowledging that we may have a problem with regard to sensitivity training, that we may have a problem with regard to standardizing use of force across police. not one policy proposal answering what the protesters are out there for. What I saw is a Bull Connor response to protesting in his state. And Bull Connor, if you don't know, was the racist sheriff in Alabama or Mississippi that was one of the biggest enemies of the civil rights movement. And combine that with how he responded to Amendment 4, the felon automatic restoration of. The governor is going down a path that I assume he knows what he's going down. I assume he knows what he's doing, but dog whistles left the building a long time ago. He's past dog whistling. He is overtly with a megaphone pronouncing what type of person he is. And, you know, I had people tell me when someone tells you who they are, believe him. I believe him.
Yes, that Amendment 4 situation, that was one of the.
And if you know, Desmond Meade was denied clemency today. He went before the clemency board to get a pardon, and he was not treated favorably. He's doing like a Facebook Live about it now, but I just saw the post come across my screen. So, you know, after 2020, we need to get together and talk about what's going to happen, because this dude, I'm tired of this.
So to kind of loop this back to Amendment 3, we do have a question from the chat. How do you think, so like in the hypothetical that the 2018 race could have been between Governor DeSantis and Adam Putnam, how do you think that like that would affect issues like this, like the police brutality protests, you know, and issues related to that, if you were in a situation where like the race, I guess, is between two folks of the same party?
Well, that certainly affects turnout. It affects enthusiasm. I'll tell you how it would affect me. I don't know if I'm even voting in that race. If my choice is between DeSantis and Putnam, there's a very good chance I would leave that blank at the time. I don't want any part of that. And you're talking about kind of disenfranchising NPA voters, which we seem to agree on. But imagine who's disenfranchised when you're voting for two people of the same party for governor. So, in these statewide offices, this is a likely result. These things can happen, particularly in the legislature. It may be a little different, but in the statewide races, just because of how many people run and the dynamics of them. But you're choosing between, I'm not going to put words in Putnam's mouth, but you're certainly choosing between two people who are competing to see who's less friendly to Black Lives Matter stuff. I don't want no part of that. I understand, and I'll say this too, I understand people's disdain for the two-party system. I get it. It annoys me sometimes too. But until we get to a place that we aren't a two-party system, until we have a viable third party, I think we have to understand the realities of what we're dealing with. And I think the best we can do is open up the primary system and allow NPAs to participate. I think that's a place that we need to go. But again, I'm not willing to go that next step.
There was a follow-up, I think, just on there's a question about, and this is maybe getting a little more personal, but your organization, the People Over Profits, just a note of concern that it's not registered as a political committee. Is that something that you can speak to?
It's a C4. It's registered how it needs to be registered. Dude, like, I know who I'm talking to, and it's fine, and I've run for office before, so my skin ain't thin, but I'm Black. I'm mad that less Black people can get elected. Now deal with that. Let's just stop there. That's the problem with this. Now, I don't know what more you need to hear.
So it's unfortunate that we didn't have the other people on that we had last time, because we had a bigger group, but it's kind of a bad time of the day, 1 o'clock. But it's hit or miss if we get.
No, it's listen, we're in the world of Zoom, so it's easy.
Yeah,
to do
exactly.
things,
and it's recorded.
It's all good. Right.
It's recorded, so that's we can do everything at our convenience now. I wanted to go over real quick. I think you touched on it, but I have the actual highlights of that legislation, and I just want to make sure we covered all that. It would add felony charges for unpermitted protests, blocking roadways or damaged property. That was one. And blocking roadways, that could be something where they don't even mean to block the roadway. It's just so many people are participating in the peaceful protest that.
But I mean, so what if you're blocking a roadway? Like, so what? Like, I mean, okay.
But what roadway are we talking about? It could be a dead-end street that they're blocking. They could say that's blocking a roadway.
Well, I mean, we've had issues here in Tampa where, and we've had them in Tallahassee and other places where literally people are running over protesters. This legislation would criminalize the person that got run over and absolve the person that's running them over. Like,
wow, that. So kind of some similarities to stand your ground type.
Very similar to stand your ground, yes.
Okay, and then the next point was a driver. Okay, that's what you just said. A driver is not liable for injury or death caused if fleeing from a mob. So that's what you were just talking about.
And Black Lives Matter is a mob. Essentially, that's what he's saying. I mean, replace everything with the words Black Lives Matter, and you'll get the sense of what he's trying to do. Replace mob, replace conspirators, replace everything with Black Lives Matter, and you'll see what the deal is here.
Okay, and the state will withhold aid or grants to local governments. We went over that try to direct funding away from police into other social services. So again, a home rule issue there, which for whatever reason, the legislature is just going down on that issue. They have drilling down on that issue. They have established a whole committee up in Tallahassee that spends all its time dealing with those bills. And then the last one was, if charged with a related felony, you're ineligible for bail until the first court appearance. What? This is usually only used in violent crimes such as murder and kidnapping. So you could
protesters are dangerous people.
For days, maybe? I
don't think you're eligible for bail until your first court appearance, so
you're
however long that takes.
That's the point. That's the point.
And really, the whole point of this too is it would discourage the true peaceful protesters, because
it discourages everything.
My district secretary, she's attended peaceful protests, and if she attended one and happened to get arrested, or she would lose her job, it's a terrible, terrible legislation.
If this becomes law, I will go to every protest that I possibly can. That's what it'll make me do, and hope I get arrested.
I'll be going to them too.
And I hope I get arrested under this stupid stuff. That's what it would do for me. This country was born out of protest. We are a country that was founded on protest. People's memories are awful short and awful selective.
Yes, and we do have to give some credit to these police sheriffs and chiefs that are working to try to improve relationships with their communities, and that's where it needs to happen at the local level. That is, I think, where it's the most effective, is when the police work very much. And also, isn't there some that require that their officers live in the community?
Yeah, there are some that require that, and you're right.
And that makes a huge difference as well. And that's the kind of solutions we should be looking at.
Well, and we have to recognize that calling for accountability for abusive police officers is not an attack on law enforcement. I mean, we have to get past that. And we're not able to get past that because we're wrapping everything up in politics and jingoism and how we do as politicians. I get it. But when people are protesting against abuses, that's not an attack on the entire system. That is an attack on the abuses. That is an attack on the things that result in George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. That's what people are protesting about. They're not protesting about law enforcement in general, but it's the same kind of thing with Colin Kaepernick. He was kneeling to protest about police brutality, but it turned into him not respecting the flag, which is a total diversion from the problem that we're trying to deal with. And politicians are very good at that. And in the age of Trump, it's a little worse. It's a lot worse than it has been in the past. So we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and do you think, speaking of the kneeling, it feels like we have moved a little bit in a positive direction where they're now allowing that and not tying it into the flag so much? I mean, I'm feeling that a little bit.
The polls show that people don't have the same negative feeling towards kneeling as they did, and there's approval for Black Lives Matter. But my argument will be there's still the same instances of police brutality. The NFL doesn't have any more head coaches, general managers, or owners than it had before. I mean, we have to be able to look past kind of the symbolic wins. I appreciate the NFL donating $10, $20, $30 million to social rights issues, but there's like 3 Black general managers in the NFL. 1% of executive and Fortune 500 companies are Black. Like, these are the things that I'm more interested in, rather than Nike having a patch on the coach's shirt that says coaches for racial justice in the NBA finals. Like, we can't allow ourselves to be distracted by the symbolic things that we're given. We have to understand that there are some systemic things that need to be dealt with in terms of who has power, who gets arrested, there's all these things going on, and that's what the protests are about. And so you can't let corporate America off the hook when they seem to be, oh man, they're really interested in these helping these causes. I can't tell, because 1% of their executives are Black.
Yes, that's a very good point. And also how we have corporate America deciding a lot of policy that the government should be doing. And what I'm using as example right now is the fines that they put on their teams for not wearing masks. Right. Are you aware of that?
Yep.
It's good that they're doing that, but it's a shame that we have to take our direction from the NFL.
Have you seen the polling numbers on masks as it correlates to your party affiliation? It is scary.
It is really
scary.
I don't understand that, and I wish I just don't understand it, and I guess it's just a denial of science.
My pastor says this. That's one of those things you got to give to Jesus. I don't know, and I don't know it either. I gave that one to Jesus a while ago. I can't analyze that one. I don't know.
Well, and we know that we have to conquer this virus in order to get our economy back up. And you
and I know that. There's other people that would say we have conquered the virus. Our economy is better than it's ever been. Trump's the greatest president for Black people since Abraham Lincoln. Like that. That's that's what I like. I don't think we are. I don't think we're changing any minds at this point. I think we just got to turn out people and make sure we get them where we want to get them. I don't think we're at a point where president or Republicans do something where someone's like, you know what, that's the line. That's too much. Like, I'm done. I don't think that exists. I don't think that exists. I think that we're just at a place where we're so much in our own corners, and myself included. Like, I used to try to pride myself on trying to listen to both sides, but I'm so mad and reactive and a little bitter about how the Black Lives Matter stuff has gone down that I've also, and I admit it, I've retreated into my own corner in a way that I don't want to deal with the other side. I want my side to get elected so we can do some stuff. And I'm, I guess, self-aware enough to admit that, but nor am I in elected office though. But I mean, I'm at a place these days where I just want my side to get in there to try to do some things, because I don't think the other side is capable or willing.
Well, and with the deaths over 200,000, that was a big milestone that is not really being recognized. It's being pushed under the carpet, and they're now saying that it could be at 400,000 by the end of the year, which we are looking at World War II casualties.
Well, and instead of focusing on that, people are focusing on the lawlessness in Portland and Kenosha and Florida, and like any other time, the fact that 200,000 people have died because of the administration's botched response to a virus would be the #1 news on every day, every show, and you don't even hear about it on certain networks.
It's the third leading cause of death now.
We're in a weird place.
We really are.
We're in a weird place. I hope we're not here permanently, but we got to do some stuff in November. I hope we're not. I hope we're not. Like, politics is supposed to, particularly at high levels, inspire people too. It's not just about legislation and rules and laws. America is also, when we've done our best, we've been inspired, whether it's from Kennedy to Reagan to Obama. We believe in our leaders, and we like to be inspired, and we like to be inspired to meet challenges. And right now we're being led by people that traffic in the worst of us. And I hope that we can get back to a place where we are willing to elect people that inspire and to be inspired. I hope we're able to get there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
No, of course. I'm happy to do it, and I know you're working hard. And these are really cool. I used to do little Facebook Lives when I was in my office in Tallahassee, just randomly to explain to people kind of what was going on, because people look at Tallahassee as like Mars. Like, they don't know kind of particularly your constituents. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what you do. They just know that you're never home. And so I would do the Facebook Lives and say, this is what I did today. This is what we voted on. And people were really appreciative of that. So I know people appreciate what you're doing here. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to, now that I know how to do all this stuff, I'll keep doing it.
Haley will help you out.
Yeah, I actually have my first Facebook Live tomorrow night.
Nice.
So I guess I'm a little behind on doing those, but
they're fun.
We've been doing this like I said, this is our 24th one.
More people watch this than you know. Like, I experienced that when a lot of people watch it that you don't even know, and I'd be out in the community and they'd be like, "Oh man, thanks for the Facebook stuff that you're doing. I appreciate it." So I know people appreciate this.
Yeah, and I think they like knowing that they can come on any Wednesday at 1 if they need to.
It's like, virtual office hours. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again.
No, I appreciate you having me. I appreciate Haley doing all the technical backup and stuff and getting me on. And I'm clueless these days, but if you get to the right people, they can whip me into shape. So I appreciate everything working good to get us on. And Representative, I wish you good luck. You'll be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
You too.